All right, let's go ahead and dive into another Mixed Media Monday. I'm Eric Scott, and I'm up to something a little bit different this week. Over the last several episodes, I've been working in a big journal. I'm going to go back to working on some small paper. The paper I'm working on is a Strathmore 400 series mixed media paper. And I thought I'd go ahead and show you something a little different, something that I haven't really shown before. And it uses only 3 different materials. So I'm going to be using watercolor paint, water-soluble pencil, and colored pencil to create some value and some depth in a little piece that I'm just going to kind of make up. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive into it. So I've got my paint here. I have a paintbrush. My water cup, as always, is kind of off camera. I've got my Inktense water-soluble pencil, and I've got some colored pencil over here. And so what I'm going to start off with, I want to build up a couple layers of paint here. And I'm going to use this ochre color, this yellow ochre. And what I'm going to do is I want to try to have a sharp edge. So I'm kind of going perpendicular in the direction that I'm holding my brush, and it's going to give me a nice sharp edge. And then what I'm going to do is just dip my brush in the water, and then that way I can blend out the paint a little bit. So I'm not really sure what I'm making. I'm not making anything in particular. I just want to kind of show you the technique of combining these different materials. Okay, so there's that side. I'm just going to flip it this way. And then do the same thing over here. So I'm just kind of using kind of a squiggly line, something that isn't too precise, something that I don't have to worry about if it's not perfectly straight or perfectly even. And again, I'm just blending it out so that way it goes it's a little bit darker near the edge, and then it gets lighter as it goes away from it. All right, so let me go ahead. I think I might want to go ahead and do one more or a couple more. So I'm going to kind of do a series of these. And again, just trying to make it a little darker at the edge. So even kind of working all the way down in here in this little spot, get a little bit of water. And that water just allows me to fade it out if I need to rinse out my brush even more. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of bring it all the way over to that first line. And if that line gets a little bit fuzzy, that's okay. So what I'm doing is kind of having a series of these lines. Maybe this one will kind of come down and connect with that. And again, rinse out my brush. So this starts to create a little bit of depth because I'm using value. So I'm letting the paint fade out. And the effect that I'm going for, and I'm trying to blend that out a little bit. There's a little dark spot. The effect that I'm going for is that the dark line, that's going to create a shadow. So what I'm hoping for is that this section will end up looking like it's below this section. This will look like it's below that. And then this will be below that. And then this will be down as well. And I think what I'm going to do is just to do one last. I don't want this to be pure white. So I just want to put a little light wash of that yellow ochre. All right. So let me go ahead and hit that with the hair dryer. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and make this just a little bit darker. There's a dark brown. I'm trying to think. Actually, I might use over here is it's called red oxide, and maybe I'll use some of that. That'll add some reddish kind of rust undertones to it. So I'm gonna kind of do the same thing, just kind of paint it right up. If I wanted to, I could do new lines. Actually, maybe I will. Maybe I'll do one right here. And again, but before that dries, let me go ahead and brush that out. So what ends up happening is I'm layering the paint. Now I let that dry a little bit. If you can't get rid of that line, that's all right. Whenever I add the other materials, we'll kind of hide it and go back. So I'm kind of just repeating what I've done, but I'm doing with the red oxide. That's just going to give it this kind of this warmer, kind of reddish tint. Let me go ahead and do this side. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between the sides, and that gives the paint a little bit of a chance to dry. And that way I don't have to always use the hair dryer. Again, just trying to let that paint fade out. And so what I'm doing is I'm really building up from light to dark so that yellow ochre is, oh, that's way too dark. So that yellow ochre is the lightest value. And then this red oxide's a little bit darker. And then I'll probably do one more on top. Sorry, I had a little bit of a different color there that left a little streak. Don't know if you noticed it or not. It's a problem with these little pans. Sometimes you accidentally touch the color that's next to it, and you end up with these little streaks of a different color. Okay, blend that out a little bit, just like I did before. Just a little bit of this right down the middle of that. So it should start to look like this thin strip here is the highest up. Like it's above everything else. It's lighter. You got that kind of darkness, the darker values on either side. I think I'm going to put a little bit of, make this a little bit darker. Okay, let's go ahead and hit that with the hair dryer. Okay, so I'm gonna use the Inktense pencils that I have, and I'm gonna use kind of just some kind of earth tones. And let's see. So the colors I have one that's called mustard, which is a real kind of bright golden mustard color. I have a baked earth, which is a reddish brown, kind of a terracotta color, a dark chocolate, which is a dark brown, and the willow, which is kind of a medium brown. So I'm going to start off with the mustard. This is going to really give this a golden cast. And I think what I'm going to do, what I could do is I could just kind of keep going and shade in next to these edges, and then really kind of build up the value. But I think what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of interest to this. So I'm just going to take this pencil and I'm going to draw some lines that kind of echo what's going on, but they're going to kind of crisscross. Maybe I'll go over them just to get a little bit of more of that pigment on there. Now, because I'm using the Derwent Inktense paints and pencils, the paint isn't going to really lift up that much when I paint over top of it. If you're using plain watercolor, sometimes it will. Sometimes as you paint over it, they'll really lift up and lighten. Not so much with the Inktense, but you can see how that mustard color just spreads around, and I'm just kind of giving this whole thing this golden yellowish mustardy color. Just gonna kind of, it's gonna just give it a bit of a yellow cast, and but the lines are gonna stay. So I can scrub pretty hard, and some of those lines almost disappear, but I want to keep them. I don't want to get rid of them. Okay. Now, if I'm looking at it and I feel like, oh, there's not as much of the mustard color, I don't have a mustard up here. So what I could do is I can take this and make sure it's the one I want. And I have a wet tip on my brush, wet brush, and I can just scrub it and pick up some of that and paint with it. So I just didn't quite get as much of that golden mustardy color as I wanted. All right, rinse out my brush. All right, so let's go ahead and dry that. Now I do really want this paper to be dry before I do more with the Inktense pencils. I'm gonna use the Baked Earth. So now I have lines and I have these painted lines that I did earlier. So I can kind of play with both of them. So I think what I wanna do, let's go ahead and start here. And I'm gonna just shade. So what I'm doing, this is Baked Earth, which is that terracotta reddish brown color. I'm gonna have that real distinct line. So let me get that in, and then I'm going to shade. So I'm going to lighten up on my pressure as I go away. And then down here, do the same thing. So this really allows me to kind of define my edges. And you can see how it's getting darker. It's going to create more depth. So I'm working up to the dark. So I'm going from light to dark. So now I have all these lines down here. So I think what I want, I'm going to do this one first. And then there's this line that I drew in with the mustard that comes down and it crosses. So I think I'm going to shade that in too. So I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see that, like how it's a little darker here. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to maybe shade on this side of that line I drew in. I don't want that to be super dark. Okay, let's go ahead and come over here. So this is just going to be kind of a non-objective thing. It might start to look like layers of cloth, or with these colors, I always kind of think of leaves, kind of the fall, autumn leaves, those browns and those golden colors. So I have that line, so I think I'm just going to hit that up with a little bit, not much. Love these little pieces of paper just to be able to turn them in different directions. So this baked earth really ties in well with that red oxide. I do have a red oxide Inktense pencil, but I'm going to use this baked earth because it's a brownish color. Yeah, because I want to keep this kind of, I'm going to add some darker browns too. Again, trying to keep a sharp edge here, and then I'm shading out. So what happens is, let me turn it back this way, it's darker here. That creates a shadow. So it looks like the light part above it's casting a shadow, which makes this section look like it's below that section. I'm just going to take my paintbrush, and just like I did with the watercolor, I'm going to blend that out. I want to try to keep that nice sharp edge. And blend that out. Just going to do the same thing. Now I have a couple down here, so let me go ahead and just do this first one. And blend that out. And I have shaded over here, so let me go ahead and turn this around. Sorry if the turning around is kind of getting confusing. It's just a lot easier since I'm right-handed to come in. So I like to come perpendicular to the line. It's something that really helps me. Some folks really like to paint parallel, but for me, I like to come in perpendicular. And I'm using a filbert brush, which actually has a rounded tip on it. So it's flat in one direction, and then it's rounded in the other direction. It's become one of my favorite brushes. Add a little bit here. So again, trying to keep a slightly sharp edge. That one was real light, so it's going to be a little bit more subtle. And this one. So as I layer up the colors, it's just going to create more depth, more space, more value. All right, I had this little bit right here that had a little bit of Inktense pencil, and I'll come back over it. All right, turn it this direction now. So I want to keep that real crisp edge. That's really what's going to make the shadow effect. If that edge gets kind of fuzzy, it's going to look more rounded than a real sharp, crisp edge, almost kind of like a cliff or like a thin piece of paper that's kind of, one paper is on top of the other paper. Or like I was saying before, that idea of kind of like a leaf, like one leaf on top of another. And I think I've got one more. So some of the stuff in here is getting a little mixed up, but that's okay. So, but you really start to see how like this really recedes into the space. This here recedes in kind of below that. So getting some really nice value there. Let me go ahead and dry it before I do the next color. Okay, so I'm going to turn to the willow. I do need to sharpen it, so sorry for the noise. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of continue the same thing. So this is going to be a slightly darker brown, not super dark. I do have it's called dark chocolate. If I want it to feel like it's further in, so maybe what I want is like this down here to feel like it goes, kind of turns and curves down in a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is to bring that brown out a little bit further. So that way it's kind of going into the shadow a little bit further out. It's going to look like it's kind of going deeper in and is curved a little bit. So if I keep the brown real close to the edge, then that shadow is just barely being cast, and this part isn't up, is this part here is close to this little edge, if that made sense. And down here where it dives in, it's going to feel like it's further away. So let's see if that does it. I'll go ahead and paint it now just so that you can see it. So now I'm putting kind of clear water out here. And that's going to allow me to blend this slightly darker brown. I mean, it's not a super dark brown. It kind of goes on a little bit darker. And then you paint over it and it's not super dark. So I've really put a lot of pigment in between this line and this line. Again, really trying to push that in further, in deeper into the paper. This is the kind of stuff that always fascinated me as a young artist, was just that notion, like I could take materials and paint it on a flat surface or draw it or shade it on a flat surface. And I can make that surface look like it curved or undulated or was torn or that it was made of multiple pieces. And I mean, even just shading that little bit in there, you can kind of see how that just really gets dark and kind of dives under. And with that little bit of light, I've sort of left some light up here. I didn't put a lot of paint into it. Really makes that edge pop out. So the pencil allows me to keep that nice sharp edge on one side. Then shade it out. Let's go ahead and paint this out. So it's nice to sometimes do shading in one area and then paint over it, because you don't know exactly what it's going to look like until you add the water. And remember, I don't have to use plain water. I can use the paint if I wanted to really change the color. I could add a little bit of paint into it and it'd mix with that brown. And give me something different, but I'm just going to keep it with plain water right now. So I want this part here look like it's a little bit higher than this. So that's why we've got that little shadow there. But then that's even darker. So that side really kind of curves in, goes down, and then down here it's darker. So I like to play around with these more abstracted, non-objective kind of forms and lines. But this is something, I mean, I keep mentioning leaves, but it does give me that kind of sense. So this could be a good technique to use to, if you're doing really anything, but anything organic. I mean, thinking about flower petals or leaves and just kind of creating depth in them and creating, making a flower petal look like it's curled. Okay, I'm going to dry it because I want to get into this part, and then there's a couple pieces down here I want to shade into before I go to the next one. There's that one, this one, and this one. All right. So if I was doing this just in my studio for myself, I'd probably do another color. So I even got it out. It's called dark chocolate, and it's a darker brown. And so I'd probably go in and do that as the next color and do the painting over and such. But I think you kind of get that idea that I'm just slowly building layers of the Inktense pencils, starting out kind of light, getting darker and darker each time. But I want to go ahead and get into the colored pencil. And so I'll bring in some of the really dark values with the colored pencil. So let me get these out of the way. Let me dry this so that it's ready for the pencil, the colored pencil. So I could use the Inktense pencils and use it like regular colored pencil and kind of shade with them. But the thing is, since I have colored pencil, I'll go ahead and use them. So over here, I've got some colored pencil. I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab, I have one, it's called dark terracotta. So it's going to be very close to that baked earth. And then I have a dark brown and I have a brown earth. I forget, I think the brown earth is a little bit darker. If I'm not sure, I can just test it out on the back. There's the brown earth. Oh no, the dark brown is actually darker. So I think I'll just use these two colors. So I'm going to start off, depending on the pencil. These are Derwent Coloursoft pencils. I find that it's best to start with the darker color. Other pencils, sometimes you can start with the lighter color. But I'm going to start with the darker, and it just depends on how they blend. So you can always practice. But this is where I can really come in and make those sharp edges. And then I just like I've done before, just shading it out. And then there was another edge right there. So I can really, if anything started to kind of get blurry or kind of disappear, you can see how just that little bit of brown, a little bit of that dark brown just makes it pop. Just a little bit up in here. All right, we'll come back in with this terracotta. And this terracotta is really going to be able to blend in with what's underneath. And I'm blending it into the dark brown. So like I said, it depends on the colored pencil, the brand, the type. Sometimes you can still work from dark or from light to dark using the lighter colors, going up into the darker colors. But I found just from experience with these Coloursoft, they seem to work better to put the dark color first, and then it's easier to blend the lighter colors on top. So, but anyway, I mean, just look at that. Look how dark, especially down here. So this starts to have a lot of depth. And I can just keep doing that. I don't have to do all of it. You know, I don't have to do it on every single one, but wherever I want it to be a little bit darker, where I want the edges to be a little bit more defined, and come back in with that dark terracotta. I've got a couple other colors over there I could blend in too. And then maybe what I want to do is just bring in a little bit of this dark terracotta along this edge. So this dark terracotta is a little bit darker than the other colors I used of the Inktense pencil. So it's darker than that baked earth. It's a little bit darker than that willow. So it really helps me get that real nice sharp edge. But I can blend it in to the rest of it. So this is one of my favorite techniques, is to really build up the composition and the color and stuff with the paint and the water soluble pencil, and then come in with colored pencil. And then to top it off, to kind of finish it off, what I can do is I can take a light color. I have white here. Let me go ahead and sharpen that. And then sometimes if you need to, you can come in with a little bit of white and just hit on the edge. I don't know if that's showing up at all, but sometimes you can just, you know, like a little highlight, or maybe like, you know, maybe you got the edge got kind of fuzzy. So coming in with the white, you can kind of make it a little bit sharper. So that it's a great way to kind of have some highlights. But you know, you really start to see how like this in here seems deeper than this part. So that's, this part looks like it's underneath, oops, sorry. This part here looks like it's underneath that. This part here looks like it's underneath this and that. You know, and so we can kind of go all the way over and see how it looks like it's layered, like it's multiple pieces, but it's just a single. It's, I don't know, I just love I just love when that kind of happens. So if I wanted to sign it, maybe I'll take this dark brown and sign it down at the bottom. And there we have it. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, maybe something a little bit different, a little bit something I really haven't. I mean, I do it myself a lot in my art, but I haven't shared it too much. I've maybe a few times in the past, but definitely just something a little bit different. So if you're if you're thinking about how you want to get some depth into your work, this is a great way of doing it. So just kind of wanted to show you that. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, of course, pop them into the comments. And then if there's anything that you want to see, I'll try to respond. And yeah, so anyway, I appreciate you tuning in for another Mixed Media Monday, and I'll see you next time. And as always, happy creating.